Hi, everybody. This is the last lecture on flowering plants and actually plants that we're going to do this semester. We're going to start with the fungi after your exam next week. And so this lecture is all about angiosperm diversity and to give you an idea about some of the different kinds of plants that there are. If you are a botany major, you should definitely know the proper name for these families, like Ranunculaceae instead of the buttercup family. If you're not a botanist, it's okay with me if you know the buttercup family. I think it's important for you to have an idea about these major plant groups. And so we're just going to do the major plant families today that are part of the flowering plants. And so I think the quickest, easiest way for you to work on this is to just have a notebook or a piece of paper handy. And as I go down through the different major plant families, you just jot down a couple of examples of them and something that you think that's interesting about them. And that's probably enough detail that you need for this lecture. So the Ranunculaceae family is again called the buttercup family. There are about 1,500 species in this, and they're almost all herbaceous. So non-woody plants are in this group. Most of the members are at least slightly poisonous. Many are very poisonous, but almost all of them have at least some kind of poison to them. So one of the ones that you may know that's local is buttercup. That's the little flower there on the left. That kind of is indicative of the way a lot of these look. They're not all round and yellow, but a lot of them are. The plant over on the right, golden seal, is another local plant, and that is used as a medicinal plant. Monkshood is commonly found in perennial gardens. It's a very pretty plant. It's a big flower, or a big stalk. So that's an inflorescence, and they stand often 3.5, 4 feet tall. They come in a variety of purple and lavender and bluish colors like this. Another name for monkshood is wolfbane. This plant is pretty toxic. The roots are poisonous. They have been used as an arrow poison, or the roots have been mixed in the past with meat and then put out as a bait when wolves were being hunted, and it is fairly poisonous. Some people, have used this herb in other ways. It does eventually cause delirium, as long as you don't have too much of it. If you have too much of it, it could kill you. So it was, quote, used by, quote, witches, really to induce people to have experiences. It is highly toxic to the touch, and so it's important when you're working around monkshood. People who have it know this. But if you ever are out checking plants out, if you see something that kind of looks like this, you wouldn't want to touch it directly. The compounds can be absorbed directly into your bloodstream from your skin. And so we kind of are a little careful with this plant. You can kind of see how maybe it got its name, monkshood. The top of the flower, the cap of the flower is kind of comes out and makes like a little hood over the rest of the flower. So anyway, there's wolfbane, which I think is a kind of a cool example of the buttercup family. So the next family we're going to do is Lauraceae, which is the laurel family. And many of you know all kinds of members of this group. So camphor, cinnamon, all kinds of things are used medicinally from this group. Camphor oil is often found in antiseptics and in pain relieving creams and gels. Along with the menthol, its active ingredient is found in lots of different kinds of things. You can see some Vicks vapor rub there. I don't know if your mom ever put that on your chest, but it actually does help you and kind of makes you feel better. So commercially, there are quite a few important, economically important members of this group that you might have heard of before. the bay leaves, or the bay laurel, is part of the Laurelaceae, and so there's some quote California bay laurel leaves that have just been picked and put into that jar. And by the way, the bay plant makes a nice house plant, and it's pretty easy to grow, and so you can just break some of that off yourself and have some bay leaves for cooking. And they do make a really nice seasoning for a lot of things. Couple of other plants you might have heard of or seasonings you might know of are mace and nutmeg. So mace is sort of the actual seed part of the nutmeg. The nutmeg is the outer coat of that fruit. Both are sold as pretty important seasonings for cooking. Whole cloves, if you've ever seen any kind of clove material, cloves are often used in pickling spices. They come from this group as well. There is a little picture of some witch hazel, which is a member of the laurel family as well. Witch hazel is often used as a skin astringent cleanser. Sometimes you find witch hazel in colognes or aftershaves as well. So all of these different things are part of the laurel family. Most of the laurels are shrubs or trees generally. They're a little bit bigger plants, and so again, that's a little generally, but most of them are shrubs and trees. So the next group we're going to do, and I am trying to go through these fairly quickly, is the poppy family, which is Papaveraceae. And this is a picture of an opium poppy here. And so soon the poppies will be blooming locally. We have lots of people who have orange and red oriental poppies in their flower beds. Those poppies, when the flowers, the petals fall off, the capsule will kind of look a little bit like this, although they don't contain opium. And so opium is basically the dried sap from an opium poppy. And this latex sap has a lot of naturally occurring narcotic alkaloids in it. This is also where morphine and codeine come from, which are incredibly important pain relievers. Morphine can be acetylated in a lab to produce heroin. So that's where heroin comes from. And so the sap there is really a protective agent designed to protect those seeds while they're developing. Again, you're looking at an ovary here of a poppy. And so the way this works is people go up and all of this work is done by hand. And so people will go up with a razor blade and make a couple of slits in the poppy, sometimes more than one. And then the sap will ooze out and dry overnight or by the next day onto the capsule. And then they'll come back again and basically scrape the dried sap off. And that's what raw opium is. And again, this is all done by hand. It takes millions and millions and millions of poppies to make a quantity of this material. There's what the opium poppy flower looks like, and you can see these opium poppy capsules or ovaries have multiple slashes in them, and they only really produce that sap for just a few days after the petals have fallen off. So this work is all about timing, and again, it involves a whole lot of intensive hand labor to be able to collect that opium. So the Brassicaceae family, or the Brassica family, is basically all of the cabbages and cauliflowers and Brussels sprouts and all of the members in that group that are related to each other. They have a very unique flower. They have 4 small flower petals that are arranged across from each other in the form of a cross. There are about 2,500 different species. Most of all of these are herbaceous plants, and they're almost all found in the cooler regions of North America. That's where they come from. The list there are all of the cultivated edible plants that come from this group. And some people really love this group and other people don't really like it so much. I have trouble digesting a lot of these things, so they're not always my favorite. So let's look, again, I told you it was the Brassica family, but the common name for this family is the mustard family because mustard is part of this group as well. So here's some varieties of Brassica. So the first one, letter A, is broccoli. B is broccoflower, and C is cauliflower. So they just made the broccoflower by hybridizing the two together. And basically for all three of these, when you eat them, you're eating immature inflorescences. Immature flowers is what you're actually eating. Sometimes you're going to eat the stems as well. Most people eat the broccoli stems a little bit or the cauliflower stems a little bit as well. So that's what you're actually eating when you have these. Here's some more members of this group. A is turnip, and B is rutabaga, and C is cabbage. And so we actually made the rutabaga by crossing the cabbage with the turnip. And again, we can do that because they are all closely related to each other. And so the rutabaga is basically a tetraploid hybrid between the two, which I think is interesting too. Here's a picture of Brussels sprouts in case you've never seen how they grow. So they grow on a real tall, probably 5 to 6 foot tall spike. And the Brussels sprouts are growing there in sort of the nooks of the leaves. So those are the petioles of the leaves, and that's how you would find Brussels sprouts growing back in there. Another commonly eaten plant group is the Rosaceae family or the rose family. There are about 3,000 species in this group. And lots of times within this group, the rose family is divided up based on sort of the flower structure and the fruit type. This group has a lot of economic impact. Besides just, pretty roses to look at, a lot of our favorite fruits come from this group as well. Roses are used as fragrance material in almost all the perfumes and colognes and perfumes and colognes that are out there. Even aftershave sometimes has rose in it. The flower is called a hip of a rose, and so it's called the actual hip, and that's a really good source for vitamin C. Here's a pretty flowering rose in somebody's yard. Those are the ovaries that you're looking at there, and they mature into these structures, which we call hips, and they're absolutely loaded up with vitamin C. So sailors used to take those in containers with them when they would go sailing for months at a time and not having a good source of vitamin C with them. They would take this along and they would eat these. These are edible, so if you have roses in your yard and you don't spray your roses or put any kind of insecticides or fungicides on them, you can eat these hips. They taste really good late fall, early winter. They taste like sweet tarts. They taste almost exactly like a sweet tart. The birds love to eat them, and so lots of times we get members of the rose family popping up in other places as well. Here are some other members of the rose family that you might know. So apples, pears, peaches, nectarines, almonds, cherries, olives, all of these are members of the rose family. And so that's why I said they're very economically important, because again, all of those fruits are things that a lot of people enjoy to eat, and so it's a pretty big family. So the legume family, the Fabaceae family, is the third largest of the flowering plant families. There's about 13,000 members. There are a lot of important crop plants in this group. There's a list of a few that you know of, peas and beans, peanuts, alfalfa, carob. All of those are members of the legume family, and so it's a pretty big group. I love this picture to kind of see some of the diversity of the beans. So there are 19 different varieties of beans in that picture, and there's actually more than that, everybody. They just had this grouping, but there are many different kinds of legumes. And so there you go. If you wanted to look at those to see what different kinds of legumes are, maybe just by looking at that picture, maybe you can recognize like black beans and pinto beans and navy beans and cranberry beans, peas, kidney beans. So there's a whole list of all of those types. Over on the right is a string bean, and that's, just a commonly eaten thing that lots of people like green beans. B is actually a sugar snap pea, and C is a snow pea. And so just to give you an idea about the different kinds of pods and the sizes of the pods, right? They're again all members of the legume group. So the next group we're going to go over is the Euphorbiaceae family. And so some people just call this the Euphorb family. The common name is the spurge family. This group is very widespread in temperate regions, both in the north and the south equator. There are a few important plants such as cassava and the para rubber tree, where we get most of our rubber from. One of the spurges that I'm most familiar with is poinsettia. It belongs to this group as well. And so there's a picture of a poinsettia. You might think that the plant over there on the right looks like a cactus. This is a case of sort of divergent evolution, where the euphorbias, because of where they grow a lot of times, developed a lot of the same common structures that cacti do, even though they're not related to each other at all. Most of these, all the spurges will have a kind of creamy white sap. If you've ever had a poinsettia and you've broken off a piece of it, you've probably seen the white sap. It almost looks like Elmer's glue. And so that's an easy way then to tell a euphorbia from a true cactus. If you break off a piece of this or poke it, if you see the white sap, then you know that you're actually looking at a spurge, or a Euphorbiaceae. These have made a huge impact in recent years, because a lot of the different kinds of succulents that people have in their yard, which are very drought tolerant and easy to grow, they actually are members of this group. And nothing really bothers them or eats them, and that's primarily due to that sap that's on the inside. So another group is the cactus family, which is Cactaceae. There's about 1,500 species. They always inhabit, for the most part, pretty dry and arid regions. Most of the Cactaceae have very pretty, showy flowers, and most of them have edible fruit, which people are always surprised that you can eat the fruit of cactus, but you can. They're pretty tasty too. Here's a couple of pictures. I said that they have pretty flowers, and then I picked two white ones to show you, but lots of the flowers on these cacti also almost look like neon colored, very hot pinks and oranges and bright yellows, and that's to really help the different pollinators be able to find the cactus plants. That's why the flowers are so colorful. Here are some more different kinds of cacti. There's lots of them that live here in the United States that are native to here. There's prickly pear cactus, and I think this one's called Oregon pipe cactus, and you might have heard of saguaro cactus before. Here's the prickly pear cactus here. So here's a picture of a prickly pear cactus, and those are kind of quote what the pears look like. They are very tasty. You can often buy those in jungle gyms. And by the way, prickly pears will actually grow in our area as well, if anybody would like to grow in their own prickly pear cactus. So the next plant family is the mint family, which is the Lamiaceae family. There's a few ways that make it really very easy to identify mints. One of the ways is that their stems are always square. So if you go and feel the stem, it'll absolutely feel very squarish to you. They tend to have bilaterally symmetrical flowers. I'll show you some of those flowers, and they always have opposite leaves. A lot of the different kinds of mint oils are used medicinally and as an antiseptic in different parts of the world, like menthol. So menthol is considered to be a medicinal plant, and it's part of this group as well. So there's actually a picture of some catnip. So the picture over on the left is catnip, which many of you, if you've had cats, know that they love catnip. It's actually a type of a mint. Two things are sold at the store. There's cat mint and catnip. And they are very different smelling from each other. They look kind of the same. Cats do not like cat mint at all, but they love catnip. We don't exactly know what the compounds that are in it that the cats love so much, but they love fresh catnip and they love dried catnip. If you've ever had a cat with these, you know they like get very mellow and act a little bizarre, and they drool and they roll all over it, and they really enjoy it. So if you want to do something great for your cat, get some catnip, and if it's an outdoor cat, put it in a far corner of your yard, away from your other plants, because they will definitely be rolling around in it, and you don't want them rolling around on your good plants. Here's rosemary that's often used in cooking. That is another type of a mint. This is the coleus plant, which we looked at when we were looking at leaves a few weeks ago. There is a salvia, which is also a member of the mint family. There's quite a few salvias as well. This picture sort of shows you the general shape of the mint family flowers. They kind of have an upper and a bottom lip that have fused petals. And there's a sage, which is used in cooking quite a bit. It has a purple flower. And so lots and lots of different kinds of mints out there. To get mint oil, all that people do is usually collect the leaves. You boil them. The oil comes off the leaf into the water. And then you add some ice cubes or something, and you can solidify the oil, and you can separate the oil pretty easily from the water that way, and that's how you get mint oils. And again, there's lots of different kinds of mint, right? There's spearmint, peppermint. I knew I was going to forget a bunch of different kinds of mints, but there's many different kinds of mints out there, and so it's a pretty big group. I usually tell people not to plant these in their yard. Not salvias are okay, but the regular mints can get pretty weedy, and they tend to spread and they take over. So I'm kind of careful with planting very many mints in my yard. The next group is the nightshade family, or the Solanaceae family. This family has lots of plants in it that you know, including potatoes and tomatoes, tobacco. It's called a nightshade family because this plant called deadly nightshade is a member of this group. Nightshade has a couple of important drugs associated with it, the belladonna drugs. Atropine and scopolamine are two of those compounds that we are able to extract from belladonna. Atropine is often used to treat shock. If you watch any videos or movies, you'll often hear when somebody's going into shock, they'll give them atropine, which kind of stabilizes that. Scopolamine is probably responsible for saving thousands of people every year. Before we knew the effects of scopolamine, when people had to have some kind of internal surgeries, there was really no way to control all the involuntary movements of people's digestive tracts and bowels, and those muscles would be squirming around and moving while somebody's trying to operate. And so patients that are undergoing abdominal surgery now are always given scopolamine, and that basically causes all of those muscles to sort of get paralyzed and freeze for a little while, so they aren't moving all around. Some of the other members, again, I've gone through a few of these, but capsicum, which are all the peppers, Jimson weed, which is a weed that grows around here, and sometimes people actually eat it to get high, but it's pretty poisonous. And then tobacco and tomatoes are all part of this group. Potatoes, the flowers of the potato look very similar to deadly nightshade. The flower of deadly nightshade looks almost exactly like that, but just a little bit more purple. And so originally when people were trying to introduce different cultures to eating potatoes, people thought that they were trying to poison them, because they knew that deadly nightshade, which is kind of a weedy plant that grows in lots of different places, looked just like that. In fact, if anybody's ever gotten a potato and you can see a lot of green associated with the skin of the potato, there can be some toxins in the green part of that potato. Doesn't usually make people too sick, but I guess you could get quite sick if you ate a whole bunch of green potatoes. There's eggplant, which is a member of this group, and I'm again showing you the flower so you have an idea what that flower looks like. The pepper plant, which a lot of people are familiar with, and tomatoes both have a similar shaped flower. Pepper and tomato plants flowers are usually yellow, though. Sometimes lighter yellow, but that's usually their color. Plants are where we get capsicum from, and capsicum is the compound that gives the peppers the heat, and that's also used medicinally for arthritis and pain treatments as well. And there's a tomato, which so many people like and enjoy those. So again, these are all members of the nightshade family or the Solanaceae family. So the next group we're going to talk about is the carrot family, which is the Apiaceae family. There's about 2,000 members of these, and all of these flowers look almost exactly alike, although they come in different colors. Sometimes they're cream or white or yellow or green, but all the flowers look like this. They're umbels. And so lots of things that you eat are in this group: dill, celery, carrot, parsley, caraway, and coriander. All of those are members of this group. There's the carrot family there on your left. There's celery. And by the way, you can eat the root of celery, and celery roots are pretty expensive to buy. That's what one looks like there. They taste really good. The next group we're going to do is the pumpkin family, which is the Cucurbidaceae family. And lots of important edible plants are in this group. Some of those have been cultivated for so long that we can't even find them anymore in the wild. So there's pumpkins, squash, cucumbers, cantaloupes. All of those groups are members of the pumpkin family or the Cucurbidaceae family. If you remember when we were studying these, we called most of these, we said that the fruit was a pepo. Most of them tend to have a rind on them, often that has to be peeled before you eat it as well. There are lots and lots of different melons and squashes that are part of this group. So there's a pumpkin that isn't quite ripe as A, and there's a watermelon as B, a Crenshaw melon, and then finally we get down to cantaloupes and honeydews and other kinds of squashes that can be like different kinds of melons, like I'm trying to think spaghetti squash and butternut squash and things like that. So it's a pretty big group. All of these grow on the vine, and so they're all herbaceous plants. And so those are the members of the pumpkin family. Most of them tend to also have water holding storage devices underground. Most of these plants do that as well. And there is a picture of a cucumber on a vine in case you didn't know where pickles came from. A lot of people are like, I didn't know pickles were cucumbers. Yes, that's what they are. So let's look at the Asteraceae family, which is the sunflower family. This is the second largest of the plant families. It's huge. Most people know what a daisy or a sunflower looks like. There are two different types of flowers on when you're looking at a daisy or a sunflower. There are the rays that most people would point at those and say that those are the petals. And then in the center where the head of the flower would be, there are a whole bunch of disc florets that are all clustered around each other very tightly to make that head. So this is when the sunflowers first evolved, this was sort of a new design to have two different flowers on the same type of plant. And this group has been very, very, very successful. As I mentioned, it's the second largest plant family. There are lots and lots and lots of different kinds of daisies. And there's Asteraceae, asters and daisies. Some of them are very tiny. Some of them are much bigger. Some of them have so many petals, like in the case of this thistle, that you can't even really see the center, but don't worry, that butterfly can certainly find the center. Having those two types of flowers together in that structure makes a big flat open landing surface. So daisies tend to be favored by butterflies because there's usually enough room for them to land. But again, sometimes these daisies are really, really, really tiny. So the Poaceae family is the grass family, and this is another very large family. It has highly specialized flowers. This is where most of our cereal grains come from. So rye, barley, wheat, rice, all of those are members of this family, as well as sugar cane, citronella, and different kinds of fibers like flax are a member of this group. And so if we want to, I skipped a picture. This is a close-up of sort of how a flower works for grasses. A lot of people see those structures and they don't recognize that they're actually looking at flowers. They tend to have very long, feathery stigmas to kind of catch and hold the pollen, and so they're usually quite elaborate on these grasses. Even the grasses that grow in your lawn, if you don't cut them, will develop these structures. They do have a few special structures that we're not going to go through right now, but there's glooms and lemmas and things like that. The anthers tend to look fairly similar to the other anthers that you've looked at, but the stigmas are quite different on grasses. Here's a few pictures of oats and barley, bread wheat, and then rye. And so bread wheat is actually a cross between some wheat, different kinds of wheat, and that head is much bigger. The plant tends to not fall over as much, and that's where most of our bread comes from. So I know we have at least a couple of students in our class that are sensitive to eating gluten, and gluten is just a protein that certain members of this family actually make. And so I think I just showed you that same picture. So the bread wheat there is A, and B is rye, and triticale is C. And so almost all of our stuff comes from most of our bread comes from triticale, and so you can see it's much bigger. The grains are much larger, and so that's mostly what's grown in this country. Corn is also a grass, as is rice, and these two feed a tremendous amount of people. All of these plants feed of the grass family feed a majority of people every day are eating one or more of these grains. We really depend on these. The lily family is about 4,500 different members. And really lilies can grow almost anywhere, and there's many kinds of lilies. I've listed a few different members for you here. There's asparagus, sarsaparilla, saffron, which is a product that we get colchicine from. That's what's used to kind of freeze mitosis. So when people are doing like trying to do screening and doing biopsies for cells, they usually treat the cells real quickly with colchicine to kind of freeze mitotic dividing, and then they can kind of tell which, if you know, there's usually cells are in a certain cycle, and if all of a sudden you see a bunch of fast dividing cells, that might be a way of staging cancer. So people use colchicine for that. Aloe, onions, and garlic are also part of the lilies. I know people are like, they're a lily. Yes, they are a lily. So there's colchicine up on the left. There's a tiger lily in the middle. Down over on the right-hand side, that is just a daylily, which a lot of people have in their gardens and their yards. Usually the flowers of most of these lilies are pretty attractive. Again, these are all monocots, and so typically you would find parts in threes. So in the case of that tiger lily there, you can see there's 6 stamens and 6 petals. And generally lilies follow that rule pretty much most of the time. So the orchid family is a very big family, about 35,000 different species. Lots of diversity in the orchids. The flowers are also very variable, from little teeny tiny ones like you saw in the video when you were watching pollination and you saw that mimicry that was going on, to some really large orchids that are very showy. A lot of people think these are all tropical. They're not. There are some native orchids to temperate zones like Ohio. So orchids are kind of found in lots and lots of different areas, not just in the tropical jungles, right? There's vanilla orchid over on the left, and there's a moth orchid that's sold, also called a Phalaenopsis orchid, that's sold lots of times as kind of a pretty plant to have in your house or give away as a gift. The vanilla orchid that we get vanilla from, the part of that that's actually is harvested is the pod. And so if you've ever bought vanilla, you can kind of see it here. It's sold and it's called a, quote, vanilla bean. And usually you get a jar with 1 vanilla bean in it. And vanilla is quite expensive. Fresh vanilla like that tastes completely different than a lot of other artificial vanillas. Most people, when they cook at home or making cookies or cakes or whatever, will use imitation vanilla extract. And it doesn't really taste the same as real vanilla at all, but there aren't enough vanilla orchids in the world to satisfy our need for vanilla. So most of us use the artificial stuff. So that's the end of a quick, amazing rundown of all the different main plant families. So again, I think the easiest thing to do would be just to make a list of them and write down a couple of their members and something that's interesting to you about those plants. I'll probably ask this kind of stuff either as a matching section or possibly as a multiple choice. And so this will be on your written exam next week. All right, everybody have a good day, and sorry for the interruptions by the dogs. All right, bye-bye.